Hello everyone and welcome to another video, and it is an exciting one as today we are going to answer the question whether or not an ultra endurance athlete can deadlift 250 kilos or more. And if you've been paying attention recently, you'll know that there's some information that might inform whether or not you think this is going to happen from my point of view. So on the 11th of December, as part of 660, 240 moved like this, which is encouraging. And on the 3rd of January, 250 left the floor like this, and then sadly became 240 by the time I locked it out. So there is a bit of a niggle in the ego that I sometimes pretend doesn't exist in the back of my head, but there is a meathead that lives within, and the meathead wants answers. The answer is, hopefully, 260 kilos-ish. No, 250 kilos, let's not get too far ahead. Fergus, come on now. Anyway, before we go any further, if at any stage you do enjoy the video, please do drop it a like. Please do comment down below with your thoughts and feelings, and just tell me that sumo's cheating, whatever you want to say. I've heard it all before. Try and be original and I will give you a thumbs up in return. And if you haven't already, please do hit the subscribe button. I should mention, as you might have seen in last week's video, if you haven't watched it already, please do go and do so. It's sick. I've got a little bit of a niggle in my pec that's kind of not really that serious, but it's still there. So I'm just conscious that that pulling motion at the top of a lockout, I'm shivering a little bit actually, and I've had a bit of caffeine. So if it sounds like I'm speaking like Tuco from Breaking Bad when he's just done a big fat knife of speed, then that's exactly what I've just done. So we should probably get to work. But no, I'm joking. I'm not a Mexican drug lord yet. So we are going to go inside. I'm going to grab my bag now before I forget and head off to alleviate my freezingness without it. I'm going to start warming up, we're going to test my pec, and hopefully we're going to see a big deadlift.
I waited for someone to save. I want to tell you something new. You drove us both into a wall. I drive away into the night, and I contemplate for a while.
Alright, so going to debrief in this dark and dingy corridor because there's music on through there. Don't want to be that guy that's like, excuse me, can you bring the music down so I can film my video please? But I'm going to do it in this corridor instead. So apologies for the unexciting setting, but you don't need to know any of this. Anyway, I am feeling solid at 108 kilos, pec is holding up, and I thought I'd now lay out my stall for the rest of what I'm hoping to achieve today. So, going to do 220 next, and then I'm going to see how that feels and decide where to go from there. 250 or above is the aim, that would be ideal, and then I think I'm just going to have to really refocus on the endurance goals that I have to the rest of the year. So this is a bit of a last chance saloon, seeing how much I can push my deadlift. 220 on the bar, we'll see how we get on, and then we will meet back in this dark and dingy corridor that has been massively over-described in about 6, maybe 7 minutes. Goodbye. Okay, so 220 moved really quite well, very happy with that. And now I'm in that awkward sort of middle ground, which is kind of the real nuance and decision-making process you need to go through when powerlifting and looking for top-end weights. So I'll run you through my thinking. 220 moves well. I want 250, but I think I'm capable of 260. If I go 250, that might take too much energy from me to get 260. Do I go lower warm-up and then higher top-end set? Or do I just go straight to 260? This is the toss-up, and you're basically making a decision between energy used to get to the top end and being warmed up neurologically and physically enough for the top set. So what I've got on the bar is 260. I'm gonna go bold. I'm gonna go bold. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't move at all, this isn't a powerlifting competition. It's literally on my own terms, so we will see what happens. But without any further ado, I'm gonna get ready to go. Oh, I missed the camera. Oh no. That was meant to be a cool transition. Give it again. I am ready to go. Wasn't great that time either. See you in there. All right, so this, ladies and gentlemen, is what is known in the industry as a train wreck. And here I am, the train, in several cohorts all over the place. There's police wire, there's some tape, there's a few detectives rolling up. Most of them have sunglasses on, aviators specifically, and they're all here trying to figure out what the hell went wrong. And I'm here to give you the answers. So, all in all, did not go to plan, and what I'm going to do is just finish off the rest of the session. We'll just do a little bit of a B-rolly montage after this and crack on there, and then I'll do a bit of a debrief once we are back, because I feel like we're all getting a bit sick of this corridor. But I say again, what I could do here is disguise my failures and withdraw them from the record. But what I'm going to do is run you through them, run you through why they happened, what lessons I'm going to take from today, how I could have approached things differently, and then take it as part of my considerations moving forwards, because things do not always go to plan. This is an example of that. So here you are, barefaced in front of you, seeing how it all goes. I'll show you through my lessons in a second. Okay, so take number 2 at a debrief, because as I was sitting in the car following the deadlift session, reeling off my initial thoughts that I'd had throughout my assistance exercises, I thought, you know what, I'm going to sit on this and actually break this down from a coaching point of view, share with you guys how we would review things and take it moving forward. So first point to probably bring up is, by the way, it's strangely long time to speak without actually addressing the
elephant in the room.
No, you're not that big. You're not that big.
Oh look,
it's more of
a
marsupial in the room.
Yeah.
This is
a monkey in the room.
Monkey in room. This is Johnny Payne, who is my business partner and coach of 5 years. So introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Johnny Payne, his business partner and coach of 5 years.
We are concise here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I think we're moving on now, so there we are. Anyway, if you want a real debrief on who Johnny is, broken down over time, you can go back to the hybrid training series that we did, 4-parter. Go back into YouTube videos and you will find it. We are standing like this in the thumbnail. So, yeah, that's what he does. So what we're going to do is we are going to break down what went wrong, what we would have done differently, and just set the scene a little bit so that you guys can hopefully take something from a deadlift programming, consideration, positioning point of view, and basically use my failure as a learning lesson for us all, because that's how we do things. We are constantly working through trial and error, taking any failures as opportunities to learn, as cliched as it sounds. Whilst I was a bit pissed off the other day, yes, there is lots of reasons and lots of logic behind why things happen, so I thought I'd break that down, so then maybe if you're ever in a similar position in the future, you don't need to feel beaten up and like you've made a mistake, but it's just part of the process, isn't it?
Yeah, there are lots of positives to be taken from it. Like you say, it is a cliche, but if you can open up and have a look at these things and say, okay, it broke down here, it broke down there, this is why, then you're not going to do it again.
Yeah.
Not as quickly anyway, and certainly you can help others. So ideal, really. Well done for failing.
Thank you. I did it well. So first up is first up mentioning, since 600 to 60, we kind of agreed that I needed a little bit of a psychological break after a very big year. So I just went into not really tracking calories or macros too aggressively, enjoying Christmas, enjoying the festive period, stuck to a programming structure, but with a bit of fluidity in terms of enjoyment and what we did on a day-to-day basis. Really enjoyed doing that. It served its purpose. It's reset me a little bit up here. And because I just found myself in a good position deadlift strength wise after 660, I thought, you know what, it's been a while since you've worked up to a heavy deadlift, why not go for that? So this was very much on a whim rather than peaked and periodized in and worked up to. So there was a real distinct lack of volume and practice in position at a real maximal weight load, however you want to phrase it. So technique, execution of form, etc. can be really solid up to a certain point, but if you don't have practice under the real demanding load, when you start to get 95 to 100% plus, if you break down there, the technical practice will only get you so far, and you can't just rely on pure strength, especially from a sumo point of view. So point number one is that there was a lack of volume at the sort of 95 to 100% range, which meant that when it got to that maximal point, my technique failed. We've spoken about this since on what I would have done differently, but the sort of second main point is that I kind of got a bit excited in terms of how well the 220 moved and thought, okay, let's go straight to 260 because I'm lacking that practice at real heavy load. In my head, 240 still felt heavy enough to take a lot of energy from me, but I felt confident enough that 260 was there based on how everything had been moving in training. And we've spoken since and thought maybe I should have gone, or would have gone, 180, 210, 235, 250, which was the original plan, before my ego got in the way, and then see what happens.
Yeah, there's always a crossover, isn't there? That's what the discussion's been. And we've done it both ourselves with big lifts and things. Is this kind of, what percentage of the hopeful max are you going to be able to kind of stop at? You need to build up to it, but you don't want to take too much energy from that top end away. Only way of finding out what the truth of the matter would be to go back in time and try it again. But we think that around about 240, there might have been another increment. Maybe the 240 didn't come, like you say, 235 and up to 250, and then into 260 to kind of feel, as you've said, what's happening under pressure and what's happening with that kind of almost 95 plus almost load. The tension's different, isn't it? And actually, your interaction with that tension, that kind of neurological build, and even the blood pressure and all the rest of it, the way that your belt's tighten, I think that's something you're going to come to.
Yep.
Is that kind of pull can feel very, very different, and so your body reacts to it differently. And it's not necessarily something that you're immediately aware of, which is, again, something that we probably address if we're actually peaking very specifically for something, is to have an extra pair of eyes on in that peak moment.
And I know this might seem like death by detail on what ultimately is just, in honesty, an attempt to salvage a failed video, but also a breakdown of what is a failed lift. Was I to go in again? Would I do things differently? Yes. I would have gone a little bit lower to start with and then built up to hopefully 260. So the irony is I was confident in 260 in terms of my top end strength. I was wrong, but not confident enough in my ability to sustain that top end strength through another rep before the real top one. And that comes down to point number one, which was that practice in position on the maximal load. So, and point number four is I actually didn't stick to my own plan. We were speaking beforehand, I failed a 250 deadlift in here because the plates fell off the end. 250 was what I wanted, but because deep inside me lives a 17-year-old meathead in a stringer vest taking C4 or Jack 3D original if he could get his hands on it, nailing crunchies and chocolate milk after sessions because maximal carb and protein intake anabolic window, bro, I wanted 260 because it was 6 plates. And somehow in my head, I managed to rationalize that on the day as the thing that I wanted and just disregarded 250. Whereas had I had a non-17-year-old in a stringer vest operating and making my decisions for me, you would have probably said, you know what, Fergus, get 250 box off and then see where you are.
Well, I think, yeah, honestly, that's probably where we would have gone with it. It's 250 first. It's not like you sort of, let's just throw all these plates on and go for it. We discussed it, and I'm going to go for 260. Okay. And there was hesitation on my part, but it was there. The interesting thing, again, looking at the video, is that the 260, I believe, is there. I think you believe it's there.
Yep.
You certainly did at the time. That breakdown in form says it wasn't there on that day, but because of these kind of reasons that we're discussing. So it could have been there, maybe box off the 250, and in doing so, you then build that confidence to jump those increments differently, or just simply build the confidence to know that you can maintain that pressure once that kind of load starts to build up through pulling it off the floor. Or you find out the 250 was, in your opinion, a 10 out of 10 RPE, that's all you had, and then you know.
Yeah, I was wrong. Yeah.
So I think probably having the plates came off here. I think we know it would have come up that day and all the rest of it. You'd have learnt more, but like I say, you can go back in time and all the rest of it. But it's worth picking apart where it all kind of broke down and seeing what could be done better next time and what mistakes were made, if any, etc., etc. So there's value in this.
So we're doing this from a coaching perspective because we want to share the thought process that we go through programming for each other and programming from the athletes that we work with. And the detail around this sort of thing is where having a second pair of eyes is so valuable. And the reason Johnny programs for me and I do his programming is because we are blokes that like to achieve things, and therefore no matter how much we know, there will always still be an internal battle with ego. So having that second pair of eyes, that decision making outsourced, and a bit of logical, rational thought going into things when things get exciting, then it's easier to make those decisions and actually sustainably build and develop over time. So were we, from a coaching perspective, to take all the things that Johnny just rattled off, the things we've listed to date, and we were now peaking for a heavy deadlift, we'd reduce assistance volume, probably deadlift more frequently and spend more time in that sort of 95 to 100% zone. Yeah. But we haven't been doing that because from a hybrid point of view, that induces a lot of fatigue that can get in the way of other training. So the deadlift training was on a whim, but I thought we'd break down how we would do things differently moving forwards. And I think that leads on to sort of the point number 5, which is the grey area that comes from not having a clear structure and program in place is where injuries happen, it's where progress is hindered, it's where you start second guessing, it's where you reconsider your goals. Whereas if you set a strategy, decide what you're going to do, outsource the decision making, and then check in with that person, have somebody else rationalizing things for you, that's how you can make steadier progress over time. So even me, who needed a psychological break from being told what to do on a day-to-day basis because I had a busy year of sticking to the plan, I just needed to have a bit of fun with my training for a couple of weeks. And now this is sort of the lesson that's reminded me that actually, Fergus, you don't do that well when a grey area is given. So we're back to black and white. We're back to Johnny telling me what to do day to day, sort of by the book. And that is another great lesson as to why we all need coaches, in our humble opinions, especially as blokes, because we're all the same deep down, really, aren't we?
Some of us.
Anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to break down actually what happened in terms of position with my deadlift, just so you can maybe understand a little bit more around the sumo deadlift. We will do a video on the differences between sumo and conventional in terms of implementing them into a hybrid program. But what we're going to do now is show you what should have happened in real time, what happened, and therefore what we could do differently from a coaching perspective, from a programming perspective, moving forwards.
Well, yeah, we're going to get himself set up here. First thing to note here really is that if you're going to be sumo lifting, you can probably relax now for a second or two, that you want to develop the ability to be able to do so through these hips. Now, Fergus has got a lot of experience sumo deadlifting. I, for instance, haven't. I lift conventionally, which means that as the setup, you carry on, mate, as the setup happens, the lifts are slightly different because the tension has to be built here. Obviously, tension in both means, but the tension has to be built up here really, really tight and built up before the bar can be lifted, which means there's a lot of tension through here, and which means as we work up towards a max, you can go ahead and lift now, and we'll just talk through it. We'll do 2 or 3 lifts here. At the moment, Fergus is able to lift the bar perfectly vertically. As he comes up, his torso and his hips are moving exactly. Here's the hinge here, and here's the push through. We're not having any kind of moment arm happening here. Front nod back, one more. And we've got this nice lovely drive here through here.
From a tension point of view, the way I like to think of it is build tension in my lats up here, then grip the bar, build tension in my upper back as I start to take the slack out of the bar.
Straight through.
That's something I didn't mention before actually. Was I trying to cheat a little bit by using 6 bumper plates in a deadlift bar? Yes. Did that catch up with me a little bit as the width pulled me down a little bit off the floor? Yes. So that is a consideration. But I hadn't been training on calibrated plates, so I thought I'd stick to what I know. But a good example there is the slack comes out.
Yeah, I was going to say that. If we go back to that tension
back
point, we can imagine you're pulling up. There's a lot more weight on here, we're pulling some slack out. So he's got to get tight before you even pull. You want to imagine you've pulled before you pull.
So the motion I imagine is basically this. So I'm there. So you see, I kind of pull it in with my lats.
Exactly.
So pull it in with my lats and then pull through. So it's about creating tension here, then allowing that tension to build in your hips. And then once it's all sort of 3 connect chain, that's when the bar starts moving, you bring your hips through. So one more example just to show you that in terms of keep an eye on my back position and the way in which my hips and torso interact throughout the movement. Like that.
Easy peasy.
That happened up to 220 on Monday. I'm out of breath from 60 kilo deadlifts, that's bad.
Well, you're talking through it.
Hybrid.
You probably need to do some more zone 2.
Yeah, I think so. So what I believe happened, we will now break down. So I, with 260 kilos in the bar, as you can clearly see, did my little Yankee thing to try and cue myself into position. And then I went to take the slack, held it, and then collapsed in my lower back.
Just there, exactly that.
And then if you look at shoulders, hips, just the entire position. So here I am, good position with my hips. And then I went here and let my lower back collapse.
As soon as you come back to that nice start position, as soon as this breaks, you're going to see a chain reaction all the way down. If that breaks here, let that relax. If you break, that's it. It's just going to break all the way down here. And then what happens there is the shoulders dip forward because the hips are coming up. Just follow my arm. The hips come up. Now, obviously, this is really exaggerating the process. But from there, I mean, if you even try and lift that, don't go too far with it, but even try and lift that 60 kilos from there in that position, it's terribly uncomfortable.
All here.
Yeah, it's terribly uncomfortable. It's the same as if the bar spun out in front of you. You're lifting from too far away. You pull it right back in, nice and tight. The positioning is great, and you're going to be able to get that vertical pull because everything's working in tandem. What we need is these two hinges, or this hinge to move in tandem with the torso, and the whole thing to kind of operate like a winch.
So what you can see with 220 is that it moved like this. And with the 260, I went. And then once I got here,
there's no way.
I'm basically locked out.
There's no way.
There's no way. This is not a good time for chit chat, Johnny. But I am basically locked out. My lower back's doing all the work. My scaps are basically maxed out. And I've got nowhere to go from here other than angrily grrr, and then storm off and make a scene in a public gym. So that was how that went, but let's look practically. So why did I collapse here? One, I was in between belt loops, which is not ideal, so I lost a bit of tension there. Two, a little bit more core work, a little bit more lower back work, but difficult things to manage in terms of volume around hybrid training because there's a lot of fatigue that comes into play. But one exercise that we'd recommend if this is happening to you on a deadlift, part of your sumo or your conventional, is block pulls, which for the purposes, because the other rubber block is in a different room. So the merit to these is that you can basically learn to build tension in a higher hip position with a super maximal weight without incurring as much fatigue. So what I mean by that is it allows you to overload the same premise as a Mark Bell slingshot, the same premise as bands, the same premise as chains. It allows you to add more weight in a different position that doesn't induce as much fatigue because you're not doing it through a full range of motion as you would do with a conventional deadlift. So I could have 240, 250 kilos on here and maybe do it for a set of 3 because there is that much of a difference off the floor for me to deal with. But what's that going to do? It's going to force me to learn to build tension off the floor here in that higher hip position as if I'm 2 inches off the floor into the movement already. So then I can basically break and work through that. And in doing so is building strength in the areas relevant to the deadlift position and doing it at a weight, which then allows me to build volume in that position that is approaching maximal, if that makes sense, going back to point 1 from before. So from a coaching point of view, we would observe the failure, which is what we've done. We've looked at that already.
Yep.
We would then break down why it's failed within the broader context of that failure. We would then make a plan as to how we were going to work it into the goals next. We would then isolate what exercises are going to best target those weaknesses. We would then go through a period of trial and error on how best to work that in for the athlete, for the individual, into their goals as a hybrid athlete. Not going to look the same for all people because all people respond differently to different demands. But for me, that's probably death by detail on something that you didn't know you needed death by detail on. But there is the world's most in-depth explanation of why I failed a 260 kilo deadlift. And I do genuinely, all jokes aside, hope that that's been somewhat useful in terms of isolating and reframing failure when it comes to lifts, because being a millimeter out on a squat, millimeter out on a bench, slightly off position in terms of your triple extension on a clean, all these tiny little things can be reviewed, can be improved, and can make a huge difference in terms of the numbers on the bar that are then successful in terms of you achieving them. So anything else to add?
Yeah, real straightforward. Practice the skill, practice the tension, work around those kind of failure points if we need to. So block pulls, deficit pulls, etc. Work around where we find the weakness. Check your ego.
Yeah, I feel attacked.
Well, I mean, we've both been there, and it's not really, we've discussed it, really wasn't a big an ego issue, but make sure you kind of, like you said, outsource that, triangulate that.
There was a hint of ego, and my ego won, where I think my rationale should have said 250 kilos, play it safe, then see what happens. Yeah. But whether it's overconfidence, whether it's ego, I don't know. Either way,
well, I mean, you have to gamble to get forward. And the very last part of that is very clear. We've said it a few times. It might be trite, might be cliche. But there's opportunity in failure. I mean, We've had a moment where we both kicked the wall and all the rest. That 260 didn't come up. I mean, I did it at home too when I saw the video come through. But then, okay, what do we do now? What do we do now? Well, we make the 260 come up, and when it comes up, it will be extra tight, extra special. So
yeah,
it's all good.
That's it. And I think it's important to remember that the whole reason that we peak and plan and work towards goals from a sort of period of time out, rather than just YOLOing it after Christmas because you're full of calories, is because all these things are worked into a training plan and a program, which is why we believe, unintentional noise there, that you all should have coaches at whatever level you are. And funny story, we just so happen to offer that as a service. So if you are interested, please do head down to the link below. But we do just want to really make today's focus basically an isolated incident of, look, here's something that's not gone to plan for me. Let's own that failure, analyze it, see what we could do differently, and hopefully place that into a context that you can understand and apply at home. So I do very much hope you have enjoyed watching, you've taken some things away. If you have, do like the video, comment down below, and make sure that you have subscribed. And Johnny, are we going to do a conventional versus sumo deadlift video at some point?
We will. Conventional sumo.
Who wins? Find out next time on Jackass.